Hey there, folk. Welcome back. So for today's video, we're going to be discussing downsizing your collection, which I do feel like is something that most collectors will do at least once while they are collecting, if not more. Like it does just feel like something that tends to happen to all of us at one point or another for one reason or another. Maybe that's just that you feel a little bit overwhelmed by the size of your collection, so you want to get rid of some of it. Or maybe it's like a more unfortunate situation where you have some sort of like financial emergency and you need to sell some dolls to recoup some money so that you can like take care of whatever's going on. Again, whatever the reason might be, I do feel like downsizing is just something that is part of collecting. And one of you guys commented on a video recently and said that I should make a video on tips for downsizing. And I immediately went, say less, and started writing down some tips in my notes app. So those are what we're going to be going over today. These are just my tips. So like, I probably won't cover everything. That would be kind of crazy for me to assume that I would cover every single tip. But they're just the ones that I could think of, things that I find help me when I'm going through some downsizing in my own collection. And I am doing this video sort of like in two pieces. So as I said, there are like a lot of different reasons that you might downsize, some more casual than others. So the first section is going to be casual downsizing, where it's just more of, yeah, I feel like maybe I don't love all the dolls I have, or I need some space and I kind of want to downsize. Basically, any non-emergency scenario where you want to downsize, but it's not something that has to happen as soon as possible, where you might have some time and it's not super serious. And then the second half of the video, or like not half, but you know what I'm saying. Hi, baby. Hi, little cutie. The second part of the video will address some tips that I have for those more emergency situations where you can't take your time, where you need like money or space immediately. And so you kind of have to go about downsizing in a different way because there's different time constraints, different like goals with the downsizing and all of that jazz. So yes, that is what we are going to be doing today. If you do see me looking at my phone at all, it's just me checking my notes. But yeah, let's just go ahead and jump on into it. Okay, so my first tip for downsizing is really basic. I promise it's going to get like more interesting, or like I'll have more unique tips towards the end here. But I do feel like the first thing you have to say is you could just Marie Kondo it, which is literally just looking at every single doll and saying, does this spark joy? And I will say, I don't think this is necessarily as cut and dry, at least for me, as it could be for some people, because there are going to be like, does this spark joy? Absolutely yes. Great. Keep it in your collection. There are also going to be, does this spark joy? No. Absolutely not. Great, get rid of it. But there are going to be dolls that are in that sort of weird middle ground where maybe you don't have an immediate answer, or it's like, maybe I don't want this anymore. And I do think that it's, generally speaking, again, in a non-emergency situation, better to like let that sit and marinate on it and think a little bit, just because it is a lot easier to have a doll on your shelves that you're not sure about for a little bit longer than it is to sell a doll, regret it, and then be like, shit, now I kind of wish that I hadn't done that. So for me, I think of the Marie Kondo sort of method as being a good first pass as you're going through and trying to downsize your collection. And anything that's like a strong, easy, obvious no in that method, I think is great to just like, okay, super, we can get rid of it. But again, I do think that's sort of just like a first pass, and it's good to kind of go back through and think about more, because again, there's going to be ones that you don't have an easy answer for. So for those dolls that you might not have as clear cut a reaction to, two very important things, again, like in my experience. One is that you shouldn't be mean to yourself. I do feel like sometimes we might think that we should keep a doll because it costs a lot of money, or it's quote unquote rare or hard to find or whatever now. But that doesn't mean that it has to be in your collection. Obviously, if you still love it, you should keep it if you can. Like that, I'm not saying you should get rid of those dolls 100% of the time, but I do think that sometimes those thoughts can kind of enter our head where it's like, damn, I don't really like this doll, but I spent X amount of money on it, and like it's a waste if I try to get rid of it now because I'm not going to recoup that entire amount. Or wow, this doll only had like a limited edition size of 1,000 and I have one of the 1,000 dolls, and like you might feel a little bit guilty for wanting to get rid of it or not being as in love with it as you feel like you should be. And I think it's really important to just mitigate that and say that like that's okay to feel that way, but you don't have to let that control you. You know, like you are allowed to get rid of a doll that was expensive. Obviously, like I understand that the financial aspect can make things a bit more complicated, and you might want to try to sell it for as much as you can to, again, kind of recoup that cost. But you're still allowed to get rid of it. If it's not making you happy, if it's stressing you out, it doesn't really matter that you spent money on it in the past because it's making you feel bad now, and you are allowed to get rid of that. Same thing for if it's rare. If you have a rare doll and you're keeping it because it's rare and you sort of feel guilty and like you should have it in your collection, but you don't actually like it, again, you don't have to get rid of it. That's up to you and your personal emotions. But you are allowed to get rid of it. And I'm sure another collector would absolutely love it. And like, it doesn't have to be something that's weighing on you. So I do think it's really important when you're going through to like, I guess, be aware of your own thought processes and the things that might hold you back from getting rid of dolls. And you need to like be able to give yourself permission to be like, it's okay. Whatever happened in the past, whatever the circumstances are, that's not necessarily relevant. And you are allowed to get rid of things if they aren't making you happy. And then the second thing here is that you can take your time. Again, for like this non-emergency sort of section, it is perfectly okay if it takes you a year to finish your downsizing process, because it's just up to you and your feelings and like trying to make sure that your collection is something that brings you joy. I know a lot of people support doing some sort of bin method or like storage method, where if you have dolls that like you're unsure of, maybe you put them in a box or a storage bin and you set them away for a couple of months and you see if you think about them at all. And if you're not thinking about the dolls, if you don't miss them being there, or especially if you feel some sort of sense of relief for them not being actively on your shelves, probably a good chance that it's okay for you to go ahead and get rid of those. But it's like a really nice way to almost like practice getting rid of the dolls where they're not actively in your collection in the sense that they're not on display. They're not in storage waiting to come out. They're just not there. Like they're out of sight, out of mind. You can sort of pretend that you've gotten rid of them without the finality of actually getting rid of them. And if you find yourself not bothered by the fact that they're not there, then that means that you know you won't be bothered when you actually either donate or sell them. This next tip is definitely not applicable to everybody, just depending on how you collect. But for me, at least, someone who does unbox all of my dolls and who also is definitely not averse to redressing my dolls, it is so, so helpful to keep in mind that I don't have to choose between keeping the doll and every single accessory or getting rid of the doll and every single accessory. It's totally okay to just take the pieces that you like, whether that's just the base doll or just the outfit or just the accessories, and you can keep those and then get rid of the rest. If you have like a nude doll, maybe like she's not worth much, you can donate it. Someone is going to love her. If you have a doll that still has a bunch of pieces to it, you could sell that doll, and that's like, not going to get you as much as if you sold the doll complete, but you can still do it. And that way you can retain the pieces of the doll that you do still enjoy. That's just something that I personally find very, very helpful, is sort of picking and choosing not just which dolls I want to consider getting rid of, but each individual piece that I might want to keep or get rid of. Again, that definitely doesn't apply to everyone. If you really hate redressing your dolls, like if your collection brings you joy because it's like exactly how they came from the factory, not going to be as helpful. Or like if you only keep inbox dolls, you kind of can't piecemeal it if it stays in the box. But if you are someone who has a collecting style more similar to myself, I think that's a really, really good way to, again, keep the things that actively bring you joy without having to keep the entire package. This next tip I feel like is definitely not applicable to everyone, or possibly slash probably not even most people, but it is something that I have like had experience with. So I felt like it was worth bringing up because, again, I'm probably am going to say this too many times. I'm really sorry. There are so many reasons that people end up downsizing. So like if you're downsizing because you're running out of space, this probably isn't going to apply to you, but sometimes you end up downsizing because there are certain aspects of your collection or certain dolls in your collection that are like actively stressing you out. And my advice is really simple, but like really hard to follow. And that's just get rid of it. Like if you are experiencing active negative emotions around a doll, either, if you are someone who redresses or customizes, do that so that you can like enjoy it. Or like if you think you can enjoy the doll after doing that. But if you're feeling anxiety when you look at a doll, or you're feeling like she doesn't quite fit into your collection, or just like there's any sort of bad feeling, not like a wishy-washy feeling where you're like, oh, I like this, but I don't like that. Or like, I kind of like this doll. I mean, like actively a bad feeling, you should just get rid of it. The easiest example that I can give is a while back at this point, I had bought the Mattel like Radiance collection. I think that's what it was called, the Belle doll that they produced. And I thought she was gorgeous, but I never even got to the point of unboxing her. And I ended up giving that doll away because I was so just like fraught with anxiety about where Disney belonged in my collection, if it belonged to my collection at all. And like the struggling point for me was, oh, I don't know that I want to collect Disney dolls, but if I do, this is the Belle that I want. And so I didn't want to give her away, but like I also was feeling less and less like I wanted Disney in my collection. But it was like, oh, do I want to have like just the one or just a couple in my collection? Like, I just had a whole tumultuous relationship with Disney dolls and with that Belle doll in particular. And I just was like, this is silly. Like, I'm not having fun in this regard. I'm not enjoying this. I still, to this day, think that is a beautiful, beautiful doll, but it's fine for me to admire her from afar. Having her in my collection was not bringing me joy. It was, again, bringing me anxiety. So for me, it was like, okay, this just has to go. I don't know where I stand with collecting Disney. I don't feel great with collecting Disney. Also, side note, like I did a whole video on that. It wasn't anything like hateful towards Disney or anything like that. They definitely have their problems. I'm not going to get into that. But it was more just like I didn't know how I felt about them in my collection. Personally, it wasn't about the company itself, just to be clear. But yeah, it was silly of me, in my opinion, to be agonizing over something because I was feeling so badly about it. And it was like, just don't. Just, donate the Disney dolls that you have, give away this Belle doll, and you don't have to feel that way. And I feel so much better now without her being like right there all the time, judging me silently from her box. I still think she's beautiful. I still think a lot of Disney dolls are really beautiful. I just know that having them in my collection for some reason doesn't work in my brain the way that I wish that it could. And so it's not worth it for me to own them personally. So if any of you have experienced a similar feeling, it's okay to let go. And I would say it's better to let go because, again, you can still like them. You can admire them in other people's collections. You can enjoy like box art or pictures or whatever it might be, but you don't have to own something that is making you feel badly. And then my last doll downsizing tip when it comes to non-emergency situations involves sentimentality, because obviously there are dolls in our collection that like we just kind of buy and like we can love them, but there's not necessarily a sentimental attachment to those. Whereas if you experience like going to a doll show with your best friend and buying a doll, there might be fond memories attached to it. Or if it's a gift, you might be like, oh my gosh, someone cared about me enough to give me this doll. And so there's like emotions that are wrapped up in it, and that can definitely make downsizing significantly more complicated. Now, to be fair, like sentimentality is definitely a spectrum, and just in the interest of full disclosure, I am definitely not on like the far super sentimental like version of the spectrum or side of the spectrum. If you are very very low like sentimentality, you can probably just get rid of a doll and like not be bothered by it. If you are a very very highly sentimental person, you might be like, I could never get rid of any doll that has those sorts of memories or that was a gift, and that's fine. Like, you were absolutely allowed to feel that way. I'm definitely more in the middle, where there are things that I keep because they have sentimental value and because they mean a lot to me, but I don't have to keep every single thing that has ever been gifted to me, if that makes sense. Like, for example, my husband, love him dearly. He's such a sweetheart. He is the kind of person who keeps birthday cards for years because it's just, it's nice. Like, he feels happy that someone gave him a card. And there's no shame in that at all. Again, like, I think it's very sweet that he feels that way. I'm not like that. Okay. I'm keeping like a Christmas card for a month, and then I'm probably going to get rid of it. It's not anything personal, but it's just like, I don't need all of those things. So I'm definitely more middle ground when it comes to sentimentality. So I do feel like this tip is sort of more catered to people who are on a similar level to me. And that's that there are other ways to sort of keep those fond feelings without having to keep the entire doll. Again, you could keep certain pieces of the doll, so like it's still in your collection somehow, so you still feel those things when you see like the base doll or the clothing, but you don't have to keep the whole package. Another really good thing to do, especially if it is more of a like space situation where like you have to downsize for space purposes, so like you physically can't keep every single doll. I do think that there is value in maybe if you kept it in box, like you could cut the box out and you could keep the art, and like that can be your little like sentimental keepsake where like you did get rid of the doll, but you have this little thing that reminds you of that and still reminds you of whatever person or situation you associate with that. Or if you can't even do that, understandable also, you could always like scrapbook it. You can take a picture of the doll and like save the photo and like have that in a special place so that, again, you have a way to remember those fond memories without actually having to have the whole doll. Again, those are things that like aren't going to help if you're super sentimental or not at all sentimental. But for the middle ground, I do think there are good ways and like creative ways that you can enjoy a doll and like relive those happy feelings and happy memories without having to have every single piece of it stay in your collection forever. But that does bring us to more emergency situations, which is inherently going to be like a less fun topic. Like, obviously, everyone wants downsizing to be a choice, not a necessity, but unfortunately, sometimes it is a necessity. So if you're not feeling like discussing anything bad vibes, I'm not going to get into any like crazy detail about anything, but if you don't feel like discussing anything bad vibes, totally chill. I understand. I hope you enjoyed like the first half of this video and I hope it was helpful for you. But if you want to hear the other tips, continue forward. So I have 3 tips and they are sort of all catered to different situations because there are different emergencies that can pop up. The first one is financially. This one is never fun, but sometimes something pops up that is like a financial emergency. Maybe it's, knock on wood for everyone, you lose your job. And so suddenly you're like, oh shit, I gotta buy groceries. Like, I need to sell some of my dolls. Maybe it's you have a medical emergency and then suddenly you have a ton of medical bills. So, like, again, you need to get rid of some of your dolls so that you can try to tackle those medical expenses. Obviously, I wish that on no one. I like hate that thought and I hope you guys don't have to go through that. But sometimes it does happen. And so I do think it's good to like have a tip in here for how to handle that most negative sort of situation. And I will say this is like a little bit time consuming and also maybe something that only I would do because I'm crazy. But I think it would be really, really helpful to look at the dolls in your collection and look them all up online. Like, look up what they're selling for or what they've sold for in the past and try to sort of categorize them by the dolls that you can earn the most money for. And then from there, I think it would be good to pick the dolls that like are the highest earners that you can get rid of with the least amount of like emotional pain. Because obviously, if you can sell one doll for $500, that might cause you less emotional stress than if you sell 10 dolls for $50 each because you're losing more. And depending on like the particular doll or the attachments that you have to that, that might not be true. But I just think that's a good way to go about it so that you lose like the least amount of your collection or the dolls that like maybe don't mean quite as much as your absolute favorites. I do just think it's very important in that sort of scenario to be, assuming you have the time to do so, very thorough in terms of looking everything up and finding out exactly what you can get. If you want to sell to someone locally, maybe like contact a few different people so you can figure out who can get you the best price. Just, you know, you don't always have to sell like your entire collection flat out. Obviously, sometimes that happens too. That's super suck. Again, I really hope that never happens. But if you have like a little bit of time on your hands where you can go through and try to like essentially get the most bang for your buck while getting rid of as little as possible, I think that that helps mitigate a really unfortunate situation. Sort of building off of that, because as I said, that's really something that you can only do if you have a little bit of time, like either a lot of time in your day or a little bit of time before you need to come up with the money. If that's not an option for you, if you have to like sell something and get some money quick, or if it's a situation where maybe you suddenly need to move and like you didn't expect that to be the case and there's not a lot of space in your new living situation, so like you've got to get rid of some for space purposes. Basically, if you have to sell a lot of dolls very quickly, I would say try to find another collector, which might sound crazy, but hear me out. It's gonna hurt. Like, there's no way around that. If your collection is something that you cherish, something that you've spent a lot of money and time on, something that makes you happy, it's going to hurt to get rid of that. So in this entire like emergency situation section, it's a lot less about let's be happy like 100% and a lot more about let's try to make this painful thing as not painful as possible. And I personally feel like if you have to sell like a big chunk of your collection, if you sell it to another collector, you at least know those dolls are going to a good home, right? Like, you know, they're going to someone who is excited about the purchase, who is going to appreciate them. And I think that that can make it ever so slightly easier to have to see your things go, just to know that they're not going to go and then like be forgotten in a closet. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're going to go and they're going to be like restored, maybe if that's something that needs to be done, or they're going to be displayed proudly. It can just make that pain ever so slightly less, because at least you know that even if you can't actively cherish those objects anymore, someone else is going to. And then my last tip for the day is the one with like the most grim circumstances, but also important to note because unfortunate things do happen in life. If you're in a living situation that is like anywhere on the spectrum between unsupportive and actively unsafe. If it's, maybe you're living with a partner that you need to get away from and they're trying to control you and like they want you to get rid of your dolls, or maybe you live with your parents and they don't support the collection and they're like, get rid of these stupid dolls. Like, you don't need to have those. You're 20, whatever the case might be. Any sort of like negative situation like that where you are not in full control of what happens with your living situation, and like there's someone around you that has power over you in some sort of circumstance that is telling you to get rid of your dolls. Again, I know that's really dark, I am sorry, but my tip for that is see if there is a friend or family member who can take your dolls temporarily, where you can pack them away and give them to handle, and like you don't actually have to get rid of them, but it might get that person or those people off your back. To go with like the parents example, if you are living with your parents and they want you to get rid of your dolls, maybe you can find a friend who can hold on to them for a little bit until you can get a place of your own or a place with roommates or whatever the case might be, and then you can take them back. That way your parents in this scenario are happy because the dolls are gone. You can say that you sold them. If you're in an unsupportive situation, I don't see a problem with lying to people who are being mean to you. But like, you can know that they are safe and they are waiting for you. Obviously, that's not something that can always be done. But again, we're just trying to like mitigate a bad situation here. So if it's possible, if you have someone you know who can do that for you, I do think that's a really good way to sort of like comply with the people who, again, have some sort of power over you without you actually having to lose the thing that you love in any like permanent sort of fashion. But on that weirdly serious note, that's it for the video for today. I do feel like not bad, but like a little awkward getting so serious, but like shit like that does happen and it's horrible and it's unfortunate. And I can't say this enough. I would not wish it upon anyone, but sometimes it does happen. And so I thought it would be helpful to share some little ideas I had to try to make those bad situations a little bit less bad. But yeah, those are all of my downsizing tips for a variety of situations. Obviously, that's probably not every tip in the book. I think I said that in the intro. So I would love for you guys to let me know down in the comments both what you thought of my tips today and also to share any downsizing tips of your own that you might have, because like y'all are very, very smart and very fun people. And I'm sure that you have a lot of ideas for how downsizing could be easier. So definitely drop those down below so that anyone who might be struggling with downsizing can scroll through the comments and find even more tips. But I do hope that mine were helpful. I hope that they were like insightful in some way for you guys, but that's going to be it for me for today. I do hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or your night or whatever it might be, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.